Welcome to today's video. We're going to talk about the 270 Winchester. We've got some factory options we're going to go over, and we're going to figure out later on with hand loading, is this cartridge still Uncle Fester's old cartridge, or is it still relevant today? First factory loading we have is the 130 grain SST Hornady Super Performance load, going at 3,200 feet per second. Obviously, velocity will vary gun to gun, and your trajectory will vary, so that data is kind of useless right now, but we got some others here.
And as we move down the line, we've got the Nosler partitions. They're going slightly slower, well, 200 feet per second slower. That Super Performance is going to be the fastest hand loading that we have available. And as we continue down the line, we're going to hit the Federals.
These Federals are going about 30-60, 130 power shocks, similar to those partitions. 10 feet a second difference. Same thing, just beware if it shoots well in your rifle.
Last one here that we have on hand is going to be the Winchester Super X's. It is essentially the same as the Federals. We've shot them out of our 270 and they group almost the exact same. The only difference is out of our rifle, that Federal loading is a touch faster.
This first hand loaded option that we have is a 110 VMAX from Hornady. This bullet out of a particular rifle is going 3,300 feet a second out of the muzzle.
This next bullet choice that we have is the Nosler 130 grain ballistic tips. Now, most people consider these to be for the smaller end of big game animals, much like your mule deer, your whitetail, and your pronghorn. However, there are people out there that do use these types of bullets for elk hunting. So we'll get into that a little bit and see if it actually has the energy and the velocity downrange to be able to make those quick and efficient kills on your game. So this bullet here is going to be by far the most controversial that we're going to talk about today. It is the 170 grain EOL by Berger. Now, this bullet typically requires a 1-9 twist. However, when we take other factors into account, such as elevation, your specific rifle, and things like that, we'll see that it can actually be stabilized and shot out of the 270 Winchester.
Yep, it does pretty well. This is probably, no, I wouldn't say it's controversial, but it is the most advanced bullet that we have loading for. It has the hybrid ogive, open tip match style bullet, long, high BC, slim, all the new modern features that you would want in a hunting bullet packed into one. And we'll see how this does.
So as we come to the chart, we can see in the top right corner that each bullet is going to have its own specific color. The 110 VMAX is pink, the SST is in green, the Nosler Ballistic is blue, and that 170 grain EOL is going to be the light color. Now, each of those has its own muzzle velocity based off of what our rifles get. Now, as we can see, the lighter bullets are going to be going just a touch faster. But the biggest difference we can see is that difference in BC. As the BCs get bigger, the bullets are going to resist drop and wind deflection. So what is the implication of that? As we come to the main body of the chart, we can look at the velocities. The velocities that we want typically is that 1,800 feet per second mark.
Yeah, that 1,800 feet per second is where these bullets are typically rated for their minimum velocity for adequate expansion. For the 110 VMAXs, those are primarily a varmint bullet. We're not really going to recommend those ones for deer-sized game. Antelope, shot placement is key, I'd say, with that bullet, but especially with the 130 ballistics SSTs and those 170 EOLs, we're going to look at those ones mainly for our big game because people take elk with them, moose. I mean, I'm pretty sure someone's taken a bison with them. Haven't seen too much with the 130s. I've seen some 170 data where guys, especially with 6.8 Western, have taken moose with that 170, moose and bison with that 170 EOL. So looking at the chart, we can see the velocity dipping below 1,800 feet a second on that SST. It's happening around 700 yards at our elevation of 5,000 feet. For that for that Nosler 130 or ballistic, we're going around 800, and that Burger all the way out at 1,000 yards for below that 1,800 feet a second. Now, everyone's like, "Oh, energy, energy, energy. Where's the energy?" We can go and look at that as well on this chart. We have it listed out on that third chunk over there off to the right. Looks like 1,500 feet is normally recommended for elk. For what it looks like, those 130s, you're only getting out to say 400, maybe etching into that 500 yards for those 130s. Now, out with that 170 EOL, you're all the way out to 800 yards for that 1,500 foot-pounds of energy. Really, I would say that really wakes up this 270 Winchester for what it can do.
Yeah, it definitely gives it an advantage. Now, we're not saying that just because it can do it doesn't mean that you should do it, because every shooter's got their own set of capabilities and their own ability to hit a target consistently. So we're going to primarily look within that 500-yard mark, because that's the furthest that your typical hunter and your typical shooter can do confidently.
Yeah, confidently within these western states. And so we're going to throw this on some graphs and kind of see where this velocity is, look at the drop, because then you can really see a head-to-head comparison on what these really are doing visually without going out to the range.
So taking a look here at the graph we have set up for the energy of the 270 Winchester with these 4 bullets that we've discussed. So we take a look, that 110 VMAX starts off really high. It's doing great. But as time goes on, as it gets further downrange, that energy takes a nosedive. Now that's partially because it starts off super, super fast, so it has a good amount of energy to start. But as it gets further downrange, it has too little mass and too little of a BC to really maintain that at range. And then the next thing that really catches your eye is going to be that yellow line. That yellow line is that 170 grain EOL.
That 170 EOL, it really has everything going for it. It has a BC that guys are looking for these days. Really maintain velocity, maintains energy in turn, and flies relatively flat compared to everything else. And for guys looking for energy on impact, this 170 is going to be hard to beat as an overall look. I mean, compared to the 130s, obviously that lighter blue line is going to be that ballistic, and it starts relatively well and kind of follows in the same path that 130 SSC. They look very, very similar.
Yeah, and that 130 grain ballistic is relatively close to what factory ammunition does. It's going from the muzzle 3,077 feet a second. Now that's right above what that Nosler loading was doing, as well as the Federal and the Winchester. So we can kind of look at that as, okay, that was the old standard for energy downrange. Now, with that 170 grain EOL, we can see that the 270 really gets woken up. It can take that range and extend it just a touch for your hunting ranges. Now, whether or not you can hit the target is a different thing, but that bullet will help you out at range more than the factory loadings and more than that 130 grain bullet can do.
Here we're going into the velocity. Now, energy is just a function with velocity squared. So this one's going to be very quick to go over, very, very similar information. As we can see, the 110 VMAX starts off fastest, and then the 130s come in, and then that 170 starts off the slowest. Now, since we are starting at 100 yards, it looks like there's a little bit of overlap, but if you look, they're kind of around that 400, 500, 600 yard mark. You'll see that the velocities and which one's going the fastest starts to switch. That 170, that BC starts to kick in, starts to really give you that advantage of maintaining that higher velocity, which in turn leaves you higher energy on target, which can benefit you as a hunter out at these longer extended ranges.
Exactly. So that 270, it might be Uncle Fester's old rifle, but with our modern powders, with these modern bullets, it really does stay relevant today. Because as we look here, with that newer bullet, the ranges are extended. It's not necessarily going to be the greatest target cartridge or the first choice anyone's going to take to go shoot targets out at 1,000 yards, but it is more than capable of reaching those further distances now because of not only the technology and rifles that we have today, but that 170 grain EOL. If your rifle will shoot it, if it groups well, and you are at an elevation where your rifle can stabilize it, that's the biggest thing there. Because the closer you get to sea level, the harder it is to stabilize bullets. So you have to have a faster twist rate. Now, our rifles only have a 1 in 10 twist. So we're not quite to that point where that 170 will stabilize. But because we're at a higher elevation, it gives us the ability to shoot that and have it stabilize. So the biggest takeaway here is get out, try it yourself, see if it works for you. Because if it does, hey, you can make your 270 Winchester relevant today.
I'd have to just agree with that as well. Really just try it, test it out. The biggest thing that you're going to be able to take into the field with your 270, if you're going to try loading this 170, is get comfortable and confident with it. One thing that we've noticed while shooting it is it does kick a bit more. There's a bit more energy with it. It stomps. It really lets you know it's out there mean business. So gain confidence, learn to shoot. If you have the ability to shoot at extended ranges, do so. If your hunting range is only 400 yards, go shoot the 800,000 yards. Get confident even at those extended ranges. Make those shorter shots a chip shot. Be like, oh yeah, 400 yards. I hold right here. Boom, click, animal, whappy, slappy, droppy, floppy. Right there, we call her a day, and that's meat in the freezer.